Hello, the topic of this whiteboard session is Agile Methods. We are in a world of constant and fast-paced change. Customer requirements, competitor behavior, market dynamics. And companies need to adapt to this. And a lot of companies find out that the ways of working don't fit the challenges anymore. So they are reflecting this and they are looking for new methods on how they can develop products, develop business models, test prototypes and other things, and develop their product portfolio. And we'll look into these methods today, and we call them Agile Methods. All in all, it will be 4 methods that we will look into. The first method that we want to look into is design thinking. It addresses customer requirements. And the first step is to understand who our customer and user is, be it an external client or an internal user. The second step is to find out what is their needs and problems. So what is their requirements? And based on the problems and requirements, to develop solutions. So not jumping from a problem into a solution or starting with a solution, but first understand who the user is, then dig into their problems and needs, and then develop solutions. There's 2 areas that we're interested in. One is the so-called problem space, upfront, understanding users and their problems, the so-called user problem fit. And second, the solution space, developing and testing solutions to fulfill these problems, the so-called problem solution fit. And this is what we are doing when we integrate users into the process with user research, observation, and prototyping and testing in the second phase. Design thinking addresses the desirability, the needs and pains of a client, and translates them in an idea of how to solve it. Once we have developed an idea of what we want to implement as a solution, we need to understand what we need to really implement it. So the first step before we build something is to think about a business model. And we're using a tool which is called Business Model Canvas. The Business Model Canvas is a matrix with 9 components. It was developed and introduced by Alex Osterwalder and Yves Peigneur. In the middle, we have the product, the value proposition. This is what we offer to our customers, and it is the value that we provide with our solution to our customers. And the canvas overall has 3 components. It's the product and the value proposition in the center, and then it's the demand side, the customer, the channels, and the relationships we have with the customer. It's a production side, a supply side, it's the key activities, it's the resources, and it's the partners that we need to produce a product and a value proposition. And it is the financial side, the cost and the revenue associated with it. So we have 2 things so far. We have desirability, understanding customer requirements, and developing an idea of how we can solve them. We have a second component. We have a business model to understand what we need to implement and how we can earn money with it. The next step could be to implement it, but we think first we need to prototype ideas in small steps before we invest a lot of money in a final solution. And a method that can be used there is Lean Startup from Eric Ries. And Lean Startup is an iterative development cycle with 3 phases. The first one is build. We build something, be it a product or a service. The second one is measure. We measure success, understanding if what we did works. And third, we learn from it. So integrating the results we got from the measure phase in our iterative learning cycle, and then starting from scratch. So again, build, measure, learn. It is a kind of continuous improvement and product development cycle where we improve what we are doing step by step. The results that we have generated from this iterative learning and testing cycle can then feed into an implementation process. And there we use an agile development method for product and software development called Scrum. Scrum has 2 key components. One is a backlog, where we define things from the step before and where we collect ideas that we want to implement. And then we pull from the backlog and implement in iterative phases the so-called sprints. A sprint is a specific cycle, typically 2 to 4 weeks, where we implement a specific set of features pulled from the backlog. And afterwards, after each sprint, we have a kind of finalized functionality or software features that we could launch to the market. So overall, we have 4 phases. Understanding customer requirements and developing a solution idea. Developing a business model based on the solution idea we had. Moving forward, testing features of our solution and learning what we need and what we don't need, and moving on to implement the stuff that we were able to validate in the lean startup phase. The 4 agile methods that we have seen, they focus on specific areas. And now let's see how these 4 areas fit together and what we really need to build successful solutions. The first 3 methods focus on 3 different components. The first one is desirability. Understanding customer needs and problems. And the method we were looking into is design thinking. And when we have developed a solution idea, the second step was to understand viability. And the method we can use for this is business model generation. Understanding the solution that we want to build and finding out if we can implement this in a profitable way with the business model canvas. And the third step is not to implement a final solution, but first check out feasibility with lean startup and prototypes. So building prototypes, and through these prototypes learning and finding out what really makes sense. So in the end, all 3 methods work together, and we only want to implement solutions that fulfill all 3 components. So the solutions we want to implement sit in the middle. And when it comes to implementation, we can use a method like Scrum for iterative product and software development. Each of the methods focuses on a specific component, but each of the components is required to build solutions that really make sense. The business side typically focuses on these 3 components: desirability, viability, and feasibility, making sure what they bring to implementation makes sense. And IT typically focuses on implementation and can review if what has been brought to them makes sense from their perspective. And also business and IT need to work together, that we build solutions that really make sense. Altogether, agile methods help us to address the requirements of users and build solutions that really make sense in a flexible way. And they furthermore help us to integrate business and IT cross-functional teams through the working process. And this is the real value of these methods. This was our overview on agile methods.